just about impossible to get away from this civil rights subject so long as it's before the Senate. And so you have to ring all the changes and think of all the variations in order to round out the picture. I was thinking the last few days about the amount of mail we've received on the subject. I would guess at least 100,000 letters. It could be more. And they express all views. Every shade of opinion is fully expressed. And then in addition, there are the telephone calls and the telegrams that are a part of this performance. And we're delighted to have them because it indicates pretty well how people think. But it indicates also how much or how little they may know about this whole subject. One night recently, a man called me up from Pittsburgh. I think it was 11, 12 o'clock, and for a moment I thought he was going to get a little hysterical. And did he, in the language of the day, lay me out. And as he got down the road a piece, I finally said, "Let me ask you, my friend, have you read the bill?" No, he hadn't seen the bill. So you see, he hadn't seen the bill, but more importantly, he hasn't seen the new work that was involved. And so it intrigues one as he works with it. And then you take all these expressions of opinion and try to put them together and fix them into a historical frame. But what actually popped out of my mind in connection with all this was that we have plowed what might be called the civil rights furrow for a long, long time. Certainly we plowed it for 177 years and maybe more. But the reason I say 177 years is because just about this time of the year, in 1787, the Constitution makers were meeting in Philadelphia, and there, among other things, they had to deal with this question of the importation of people from other countries, meaning slaves. Well, you see, the New England ship owners had ships with which to transport them, and that was a profitable business. In the southern states, it was profitable to have them work on plantations. But meanwhile, there was a crusading zeal beginning to develop, that they ought to be liberated, they ought to be freed. And so how to put this all together and get enough states to finally vote to ratify the Constitution. See those little problems they had then, exactly as we have them today. So what did they work out? Well, they said in the Constitution that Congress should not prohibit the importation of persons who are otherwise permitted to enter a state prior to the year 1808. Well, that meant they could bring in slaves for another 21 years. The only one consideration was they had to put a per capita, or could put a per capita tax of $10 per head on a person so imported. But there was another little gimmick they put in the Constitution to show you how smart they were. They wanted to be sure that the Constitution would not be amended so as to take out that limitation of the year 1808. And they said very simply that that provision should not be subject to an amendment to the Constitution. So you see, they got it beautifully nailed down. Now, that's about where we started. And that was one of the unsolved problems of the Constitution. That wasn't any solution, because 1808 would come along in due course. Then what? You still had the problem. New states would be entering the Union. You would have the problem there. Should they come in as free states or as slave states? The agitation in Van Buren's administration carried on in that fashion. But at long last, came Lincoln, came secession of South Carolina, came this whole question of the admission of Kansas and Nebraska to the Union, and on what terms and on what basis. And out of it all, there came what? Well, there came the irrepressible conflict. See, in connection with it, in 1862, Lincoln uttered the Emancipation Proclamation. Then came the 13th Amendment, so that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, could be imposed on a person. Then came the 14th Amendment, which is so often forgotten, and yet it's so important, because it gives dual citizenship to people, wherever you may live who see this program, whether it be Illinois or Indiana or Wisconsin or some other place. You are a citizen of the state where you reside, and you are a citizen of the United States. See, that's the important thing. You have a dual role as a citizen. And when you think of this whole civil rights picture, you're thinking in terms of the rights of citizens of the United States, as well as the state wherever they may live. So you see, the 13th Amendment came along in December of 1865. That's almost 100 years ago. And I guess that's why I call it the long, hard furrow that we've been plowing for nearly 200 years, one might say. But 100 years after the conflict and the question of adjustment came. And you know, that's one of the things we too often forget, because those adjustments and the problems relating to them are still here. This question, for instance, of voting. You think for all the world that a young man who was willing to be conscripted into the Army might even have won the DSC, the Distinguished Service Cross, would have something to say about the people who run the government and who finally, under law, order them into uniform. Sure, he should have something to say about it. But how does he get something to say about it in a representative system? Well, there's only one way, and that is when he votes. That's the only time, really, when a citizen actually participates in the business of a representative government. Because knowing, as in ancient Greece, that all the people could not get into the city council chamber, or where the county board meets, or the state legislature, or the Congress, we had to put it on a basis of representation. We'll elect a person to speak for us in the Congress, in the Senate. We'll elect a person to speak for us in the city hall as mayor, or as commissioners, or aldermen. And we'll elect a man or men to speak for us on the county board. We'll elect people to go to the capital city of the state and speak for us, whether it be a governor or a state senator or what it is. So you see, that's the representative system. And that's the one time when every citizen, if he is qualified and so desires, can participate in the affairs of government. Suppose, however, they make it difficult for a citizen of color to register. Suppose they make it difficult for him by asking him to read or recite a page of the Constitution of the United States, but you don't ask anybody else to do it. They'll be qualified to vote. See, that's an adjustment. We haven't gone through the full adjustment stage yet. Then there's this question of schools. You see, in 1896, incidentally, that's the year I was born, and that's the reason I remember this so well, or at least tag it in my mind. That was the decision of the Supreme Court that said it was perfectly all right to have separate schools for people of color so long as they were equal. Well, now you see, that's 68 years ago. Well, is that in line with what we think of as our concepts of freedom and of equality? Or isn't it? Well, I have some doubts about it. And that's an adjustment that still hasn't been made. Think of the public parks and playgrounds. All people's money, no matter what their color or origin, goes into a common pot. And they'll pay for it. Well, you want to put a barbed wire fence down the middle and say, that's perfectly all right, you have to pay for it, but you stay on that side, and we'll stay on this side. Now, before that clock runs out on me, I've got to get in one political note, and frankly, it's not going to be very offensive. But the reason I want to get it in is because I get a lot of letters who scold me as a party man. Say, what are you doing to your party? Well, I went back to read a square by a great American, and my book really great. His name is Herbert Hoover. I think he was one of the greatest in our time. In 1952, he stood before the Republican National Convention in Chicago. And on that occasion, in his speech, he had this to say. He says, the Whig Party, see, that was the party of Lincoln before he became a Republican. The Whig Party compromised and temporized on this issue of freedom for the Negro. And as a result, it disappeared. And Mr. Hoover added, it deserved to disappear. Strong words from one whose party field loyalty has never been challenged. So it is. These are those things that are founded in mortals. And it's the moral force that is, after all, the motive power of human progress and must carry this along. It's good to visit with you, and thank you.